this year, my clients got frankincense, gold, and myrrh. So
There you go.
traveled to the nurse.
Right.
This is Joe.
Okay.
So 10 years ago. And when he was over there, he was trying the small stores.
I had it done I had it done on a Monday.
Treasure chest. Rip it up.
Right.
Testing.
Ended up buying it for Christmas.
That's a great idea.
I told him, I go,
3 days, yeah, 3 days of honeymoon. Okay. What do you get?
he sells apple alone.
So you need rides anyway, you let me know. Seriously. You are such.
Wow.
He's got all these big corporations.
They were just, and he's,
He doesn't do anything now. He sits back in this warehouse. His stuff comes in and his people
Has
put it
nothing to do with the brakes,
So-
it
oh.
has to do with the
Cape May City Planning Board regular session is now in session, and in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act of 1975, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided. Should any member of this board have reason to believe this meeting is being held in violation of that act, they shall so state at this time. Hearing none, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Okay, Karen, roll call.
Yes. Mr. Becerra.
Here.
Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Riggs.
Here.
Mr. Crowley.
I'm here.
Mr. Gorgone.
Here.
Mayor Mullick. Councilmember Yeager.
Here.
Mrs. Reed.
Here.
Mr. Lundholm.
Here.
Mr. Produces.
Here.
Mr. Crippen.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have the minutes of November 26th for approval. Motion to adopt.
Move.
Thank you, Dennis.
Second.
Thanks, Bob. Bob already seconded.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, who moved? Mr.
Dennis Crowley.
Okay. Mr. Crowley motions.
Bob.
Mr. Gorgone.
Yep.
Seconds. Thank you. Mr. Gorgone?
Yes.
Councilmember Yeager?
Yes.
Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Crowley?
Yes.
Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Mr. Riggs?
Yes.
Mr. Produces?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Becerra?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have, first application tonight is 518 Washington Street LLC, Block 1051, Lot 5, site plan, preliminary final waivers and variance relief.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. John Amenhauser, the Deese Law Firm, here this evening on behalf of the applicant, 518 Washington Street LLC. Subject property for this application is 518 Washington Street, identified on the city's tax map as Block 1051, Lot 5. It's in the C1 zoning district. Prior to coming before you this evening, we did receive some agency approvals from City of Cape May Fire, Police, Public Works, Environmental Commission, and Shade Tree Commission, as well as Historic Preservation Commission, all without conditions heading into tonight. Through this application, what the applicant's seeking is variance relief related to minimum required off-street parking, maximum permitted lot coverage, and minimum required rear yard setback. The purpose of the application is to take a presently existing mixed-use building on the Washington Street Mall containing 2 commercial units on bottom, 1 residential on top, and to convert that 1 residential unit into 2 newly created residential units. For a total of 4 units in the building, the 2 existing commercial will not be changed on the bottom, and 2 newly created residential units on the second floor. Here with me tonight to provide some testimony in support of the application, I have a member of 518 Washington Street LLC, Mr. Daniel Uffelman. I'll take some testimony from Daniel to start, and then I also have Pamela Fine, registered architect with the firm of Fine Architecture, and Mr. John Halbruner, professional engineer and planner with the Highland Group out of Ocean City. So I do intend to elicit testimony from all
Everybody
three.
in?
Please. Yes.
Craig?
You will swear on our board engineer. If you please raise your right hand. I think your clients are going to testify too, right?
Yes, that's great.
If you please raise your right hand, do each of you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, self you got?
I do.
All right, Dan, if we can start, can you just introduce yourself to the board and a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, hi. I'm Danny Uffelman, and this is my wife, Amanda Uffelman.
Excuse me one moment. When you speak, would you please
Closer,
speak into
yeah.
the mic? And then if you get up and move, take it with you and pass it to your wife if she's going to speak.
You got it, Karen.
It's Amanda, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
My wife here is Amanda Adams. We're business owners in town. We own Queen May Jewelry, and we also own 518 Washington Street, obviously.
So Dan, through this application, I mentioned that we're looking to convert what you have as an existing residential unit into 2. What's the reason behind wanting to do that at this point in time?
Yeah, we thought it would be beneficial for us, especially because we can use it as employee housing.
So the purpose would be to house employees either of your business or other businesses along the Washington Street Mall, right? Make this more, shrinking the size of the units as we'll get into, but it makes it more accommodating to workforce housing, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to hear from Danny to explain why it is that he's looking to do that tonight. If there's not any questions of him, I'll turn it over to Ms. Fine. None? Nope. Dan, you can? Thanks. Dan.
You guys want to stop back?
Yeah, yeah. if you want. So Pam, if you can, are these the architectural plans that your office prepared in support of the application?
Yes, they are.
All right, can you go over for the board the floor plans we're proposing and what exactly we're looking to do on this second level?
Sure. If you look on the left side,
Can we, can we recognize you as an expert architect?
sure.
You don't need any questions, we just, I could have him say it.
Perfect, that's good. That's good.
Mr. Chairman, do you accept her as an expert architect? Mr. Chairman,
Sure,
do you accept-
absolutely.
Thank you.
And Mr. Halbrunner as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, Pam.
Okay. If you look on sheet P1, on the left-hand side is where the existing floor plan is drawn, and I also have a small existing site plan up in the corner. Mainly, we're focusing on the second floor here. I do have a little snippet of the first floor, but that's really just to show the stair. So the second floor here, what exists today is a very odd layout. There's bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, very large. Each bedroom has 2 closets. So it's a strange layout. We have a powder room, a bathroom. Towards the back is a single kitchen and just an open space, which maybe was the living room. So it's kind of hard to visualize and figure out how this was actually used. But I treated all the rooms with the closets as a bedroom. So we had 5 total existing. And then if you look to the opposite side on the right here is what we're proposing. So we're basically separating this whole space into 2 residential units. Each unit has 2 bedrooms, and each unit has 2 bathrooms. They also have their own kitchen and their own living and dining area. So you'll see on the plan, we have this dashed line that kind of runs through the center here. And that's basically the dividing wall. That's the partition wall between these units. Right down here in the front here, we have that existing stair which comes up, and then you land in a common area. This common hall will give you access to both units. So the first unit I'll call on the left side here. It's basically like an L shape with a front bedroom and bathroom, so that's a suite. And then towards the back of the unit, we have another bedroom and a hall bath. And then basically sitting right between the 2 is your open living dining kitchen. On the opposite unit, which is another L, but towards the back corner, we have the same setup, just kind of a little bit of a different configuration. Bedroom in the back with its own suite, another bedroom in the back corner, and a hall bath between. And then here up front, when you enter into the unit, is the open living dining kitchen. And both have a very small closet for the washer dryer.
Pam, can you go over the entranceway to both of the units and how they're accessed?
Sure. So we still have that common entranceway from Washington Street Mall. So it'll be that single doorway up to a stair. The stair then leads over to here. It's the same exact configuration, an L shape or a scissor stair, a winder stair that leads up to the common area here. And then each unit has a doorway, your main entrance from that common area.
Now, Pam, you mentioned earlier, right now it exists as a 5-bedroom unit, correct?
Yes.
And despite the fact that we're turning this into 2 units, we're actually reducing the amount of bedrooms overall, right?
Yes. So it's going from a 5 to a 4. So each unit has 2 bedrooms.
And now, as part of the intended development, are we in any way affecting the exterior of the building or the site?
No, actually, we applied to HPC. We were approved in community review. We're not proposing any kind of changes to the front of the building, but you'll see there are a few windows that we're adding along the back just for egress purposes for the bedrooms.
And the windows received approval from the HPC?
They did, as drawn.
Okay. Anything else you want to add right now, Pam? Before we turn it over to John?
I can turn it over to John.
All right. Thank you. Sure, John. All right, John. So if you can, in terms of the site itself, can you go over some of the existing conditions, what we're looking to do here, John?
Yeah, this is quite common for most of the properties in the Washington Street Mall. The building occupies almost the entirety of the lot. The lot size is 35 feet wide by 66.5 feet deep. It fronts on the Washington Street portion. We're separated from Carpenter's Lane by another lot that's some 28 feet deep that has a single-story building unrelated to us, between us and Carpenter's Lane. But we also benefited from being on a 15-foot wide public alley immediately to our west. In terms of the minimum lot area required, we're 1,500 square feet is the minimum required. We have over 2,300 square feet, so the lot itself is conforming. No building setback lines are required for buildings in this zone, and so that's, is a matter of conformance. Again, the lot size itself is conforming. The minimum rear yard is 15 feet in the zone. The existing building is 0.26 feet. That is a condition that is obviously staying. You heard Ms. Fine indicate that we're doing no alterations whatsoever to the building exterior. The envelope, size, mass of the building stays identical. So that nonconforming condition will remain. Mr. Hurlis has identified that as requiring a variance, I think on the premise that the conversion from this 1 unit to 2 units is a change of use, hence the need for that variance, for that, I'll say technical variance, because it's an existing non-conforming condition that remains totally unaltered or unaffected by the application.
John, would that apply to maximum permitted lot coverage as well?
Exactly. Where 95% was the maximum permitted coverage, we're at 100% in the existing condition, and again, that remains unchanged. So those are two non-conforming conditions that have been identified as being requiring a variance, albeit the condition remains absolutely unaltered by the proposed development.
Now, John, on top of that, I think we were required to obtain a variance related to minimum required off-street parking. Is that right?
That's correct. If you were to apply today's parking ordinance to the existing building, we would be required to provide a total of 8 parking spaces. 4 of those would be the result, 2 of those would be the result of the existing apartment on the second floor. The others would be resultant from the commercial space down below. Going into the proposed condition, going to 2 two-bedroom apartments, applying RSIS standards, actually requires that 2 parking spaces be provided for each of those units. So a total of 4 parking spaces would be required for the 2 units, where only 2 would be required for the existing one. So we're increasing the number of parking spaces required by strict application of the RSIS. That does in fact require a variance. That's not, is the existing non-conforming condition in terms of we provide 0 today. We're increasing the demand, technically. So as a result, we required a variance for not providing the additional parking spaces that the conversion from 1 apartment to 2 would necessitate.
So, John, considering that, under the C2 criteria, the municipal land use law, is it your professional opinion that if the board were inclined to grant the relief related to parking, certain purposes of zoning might be advanced?
Yeah, absolutely. Right out of the gate, the opportunity to use 2 two-bedroom apartments for employees of the Washington Street Mall stores and commercial activities is higher and better for 2 two-bedroom apartments than it would be for 1 5-bedroom apartment. A 5-bedroom apartment certainly leans more towards a larger family, would have multiple guests on the weekend. 2 two-bedrooms certainly lends itself more economically and functionally to being used by staff of the community, of the commercial establishments along the mall. That's an established need. I think it's pretty well documented. I think this board's actually acknowledged that there's more need for that type of residential housing for that purpose, and we're advancing that purpose by this application. So that, I think, is in fact a benefit in terms of advancing purposes of the municipal land use law. I think it certainly encourages and guides the appropriate use or development to promote the general welfare for that very reason. Now, anytime we talk about the C2, that's the balancing act. What's the negative effect that may result from the granting of the variance? Out of the gate, just saying you're increasing parking demand where you're providing none, that sounds like a pretty heavy lift. Pragmatically, though, a 5-bedroom apartment, think about the number of cars that would normally be associated with that. Certainly 2 on a regular basis. 3 and 4 would not be uncommon. Just having any 5-bedroom apartment anywhere in the city. A 2-bedroom apartment, on the other hand, certainly 1 parking space would be a reasonable demand for that. A second one, maybe on occasion for a guest. So if you look at the existing conditions, 2, 3, maybe 4 spaces being used are necessary regularly, to 2 two-bedrooms where 2, maybe 3 spaces might be needed at one given time. Pragmatically, we're reducing the demand, in my opinion, even though technically strict application of the RSIS shows we're increasing demand. Pragmatically, I think we're maintaining or even reducing that demand. So there is no substantial benefit, or negative effect by the granting of the variance. And the benefits I described, providing that necessary housing, certainly outweigh the potential negatives that would result from not providing the required parking that goes with that. And for those reasons, I think the parking variance can be granted under the C2 criteria. Now, the existing nonconforming conditions of the lot coverage and the rear yard setback, that I think falls squarely under the C1 criteria. We have a legally existing building. We don't have opportunity to gain more ground to make either of those numbers better, and we're doing nothing whatsoever to exasperate it. So to force conformance to either of those would absolutely create an undue hardship upon the applicant. For those reasons, I think the positive criteria under the C1 is established. And the same negative, potential negatives I discussed would apply. So I think in that case, both the positive and the negative criteria have been adequately addressed for both the C1 and the C2, and I believe the variances can and should be granted.
So John, in addition to the variance relief, we've also asked for a waiver from site plan review and approval related to the application.
Correct.
Can you provide your professional opinion as to whether or not that waiver is justified here and why?
Yeah, when you look at typical site plan requirements, you're worried about noise, trash, lights, stormwater management, all those things that would normally go into a site plan. Here, the outside of the building changes absolutely none. Entrances remain the same. All those things that you would normally want to see for site plan remain unaltered from the existing conditions. So for those reasons, I think a site plan waiver certainly is justified.
John, anything else you'd like to add related to the application, proposed development?
Not unless there's questions by the board.
Any questions, Mr. Chairman? Any board members?
Any questions? Dennis?
Yeah, I do, thanks. You're requesting 3 variances for non-conforming situations. The documentation seems to indicate that they've been existing for some time. Do you have any documentation or whatever that shows that the city had approved those non-conforming conditions?
Do I have that documentation? No, but I can tell you from my direct experience, 1982, Kelty's Newsstand, owned by the Caucasus. That exact building,
That was the Kelties, actually.
I'm sorry?
It was the Kelties.
Yes.
Kelties was next door.
Oh, was it? Oh, I'm sorry, above the building? I remember that building being, as it stands today, back in 1982. So do I have representation or documentation saying the city has approved those conditions? No, but that building is of an age that long predates the current ordinances, and I think the city should recognize that as such.
So essentially, you're saying these 3 conditions come to the city for a variance for the first time?
Well, no. I don't agree with that statement. You've got buildings that predate zoning.
Right.
Buildings were there, so they do not need variances because they were there before zoning was ever
Okay.
created.
That's the point I'm trying to get to.
Okay.
That this would be actually the first time the city would even consider these variances because of what Bill said.
Can I just interject, because you may not know this, but Craig, you can help me if I'm misstating it. And you guys may not know this, but we actually have an ordinance in our town, unlike some other towns, that addresses this, because it's sometimes hard to find the old records, and we have so many old things that are non-conform. So I think the ordinance says that if there's no evidence of a variance and it's been there for 20 years, we consider it to be a pre-existing non-conforming structure.
Right, I think we discussed
So
this
all he has to
before.
do is prove that it was there in 2004, and even I can say it was there in 2004. So it doesn't need this, they don't need, so it's a pre-existing non-conforming structure. There's no point in
It's a given.
tangling with that.
I just wanted to clarify that because that issue had come up before in another application.
And from my planning perspective, when I flag these variances, it's normally because there's a change of use. Now, in this case, you're going from 1 residential apartment to 2, same amount of bedrooms. It's not really intensifying the use. But as a planner, it's appropriate to flag those as being variances because there is a change of use. Now, in the case where if you have an existing commercial space and they're putting a louder, noisier, more intense use in it, that's why you reconsider those variances upon changes of use. In this case, I don't see that there's any detriment to it, but just out of course of action, I always flag those.
That's to clean the book up,
Yeah.
basically. All right. Okay.
Anybody else have questions?
What's the present occupancy of the upstairs?
Ken? Upstairs? Yes.
Yeah, the five-bedroom apartment, what's current occupancy?
Currently, it's vacant. I'm not renting it or doing anything with it because
And it has been for,
it seems to be like that for at least 10 years or so,
Okay.
I would say. I couldn't be exact, sure.
It's just a void? There's no living there at all?
No, nobody's living there right now.
Is
Correct.
it habitable? You have heat and...
It is habitable, yes.
Mr. Halpern, would your testimony change at all if this property, if these residential units were not used for employee housing, but rather were market rental housing?
Well, I think my testimony would stand the same. I represented that it provides better opportunity for such housing. Not as a guarantee it would be used for such housing, but certainly it makes it more conducive, and there's, for the use by seasonal or staff employees.
Okay, because I'm the one who gets stuck drafting the resolutions, and then I'm the one who gets stuck having these things thrown back at me 3 years from now. And your client's testimony was that his intent was to use it for employee housing, and your testimony was the benefits of employee housing. And then when this thing ends up on Airbnb in 3 weeks, I get asked, well, why didn't you address that in the resolution? So I'm just asking you to address that in your testimony, and the board to understand that unless we ask for a deed restriction, this is market rental housing that, and if it's on Airbnb next week, I'm not to be blamed. So I just want everyone to have that out in the front, and then you can answer it. If your testimony stands the same, then I think it might, but I don't know. I just want to have you testify to that, and then the board is satisfied with your answer, and we move to the next thing.
No, I believe my testimony stands.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'd like to ask a question about that second entrance. You're taking it away, am I correct?
That's correct.
To make that bedroom?
You actually can't access it currently. There is a stair there, but you cannot
Use it?
navigate it.
All right, that was my question. So the rental space below has that's going to be taken away? The stairs are in that bottom portion?
I could never actually,
The rental space below uses that section as storage.
Dan, talk.
Oh, yeah. The rental space below, which is the beef jerky shop, they use that as storage. So those stairs are effectively already gone, you know, and they don't lead to the outside. They're just stairs within the building. So there's no outside entrance to those stairs, so you can understand there is no exit that you open up and walk up them. So right now, they just use all those stairs. There's just shelving all through that, and you can't actually access them. So I don't know how long they've been closed off like that, but it's since I've owned the building.
Well, the reason I questioned it was for fire. You know, if it was an exit now for exterior, I would hate to see that taken away for that apartment, but it's not there.
Yeah, I had a question too, Bill. This discussion you just had with our council on the workforce housing versus unlimited market availability. I have two questions. Number one, is it going to be limited, would you intend to limit it to your workforce or anybody's workforce? And if so, how would you regulate that if you're going to restrict it to workforce housing?
Well, I don't think there was any testimony on the I think it's the intention, well, and Mr. Elfman can confirm this, but I think it's the intention that he'd like to utilize it for such, but I don't think he wants to restrict it so that he's always held to that forever, because there could come a time when he doesn't need both of those units for employee housing, and if that's the case, he'd like to be able to utilize them for residential purposes.
So for your argument that it would be desirable to get this variance, you cite the city's need for workforce housing. You don't link it to workforce housing. You suggest it could be an option, which means the variance could be going to something which is clearly a different use of that building. And in which case, how would we resolve that issue? Or should we even resolve it?
We don't need a variance for residential use, right? The use is permitted. Regardless, it's residential.
But you're linking it to a master plan recommendation that we encourage workforce housing. If you
Right.
encourage workforce housing, in name only, then you're actually exacerbating the problem we currently have with a lot of other issues, including parking.
So John, do you want to touch on that? Right now, we have a 5-bedroom residential unit there, right?
Correct.
If it were reduced to 2-bedroom residential units, without limiting to just the workforce housing, do you believe you're exacerbating that potential issues surrounding the variance relief?
No, the number of cars you would expect to be generated from a 5-bedroom unit compared to two-bedroom units are virtually identical. I mean, they're just substantially the same. And to paint a scenario, and this is without me talking with the client, but workforce housing during the summer season could be in very high demand. In the off-season, maybe not. It may have the opportunity for bed and breakfast or Airbnb in the off-season. Why limit his ability to do that at a time when the parking demands aren't going to be nearly what they are in the season? Now, I've got no idea whether that's intention or not, but that would be a reason I would offer as to not try and do this by way of deed restriction.
And your explanation for why parking won't be so bad there includes essentially a speculative argument that different people are going to use cars differently, they're not going to have this, they're not going to have that. That's inconsistent with the reality that we have an ordinance that requires those parking spaces. And the ordinance really doesn't say, well, we require it, but speculate about how we really don't really need it. That's beyond the pale of the ordinance.
Well, I'm acknowledging what the letter of the ordinance says, and we're seeking the variance. I'm not disputing that.
But you're softening the blow of the variance by saying, well, it could be this and it could be that, and maybe we don't do this. And
I'm satisfying the negative criteria to demonstrate that there could not be a substantial impairment or detriment by the granting of that relief.
and then when it goes to,
Dennis, he's answered your question.
what's that?
He's answered your question.
I have another question.
Well, then move on to another question, because you can beat this horse forever. So
I just wanted to clarify one more point, that if you did go to an open market concept because you couldn't get retail or couldn't get workforce housing, that does change the dynamic of the parking need.
Is that your opinion, John, that would change the parking dynamics for the 2-bedroom?
The parking
No,
is
it
actually
doesn't. I mean,
reduced.
two-bedroom, the parking demand for two
bedrooms
bedrooms
is
versus
3
5-bedroom, in my experience, pragmatically,
There's 2.
they're substantially similar to one another.
No,
Okay.
hold on one second. We have crosstalk, and it was wrong crosstalk, so I just want to, I think, if you have a question for Craig about the parking,
Yeah.
ask it into the microphone, let me answer it, because I think you gave yourself an answer. I think you were mistaken, so ask Craig your question.
Yeah, but basically what I'm saying, I think your parking, the parking is actually reduced, because I believe 5 bedrooms requires 3 spots, 4 bedrooms requires 2 spots.
But
Sort of. If you
Yeah, no.
Craig, can you just summarize that for him? And
So
just so
we're-
our record is clear, I'm not. I
We're
just
we're
wanna-
dealing with the residential site improvement standards for apartment use. So it's not workforce housing, that's not even a definition that we have in our ordinance. I know we're kicking that around, but that has not been,
Exactly.
perfected and recommended to the governing body, and the governing body has not done anything with that. So we're dealing with straight-up apartment calculations for the residential site improvement standards. Now, I believe that there's an increase because you go from 1 apartment to 2 apartments. And just the way the calculation breaks out, and I think you're going from 8 required spaces to 12 required spaces. At least that's what the plan showed,
Correct.
right? So Mr. Halbruner's agreeing with me. So there is an increase based on the methodology that the residential site improvements standards calculates it by.
okay.
So there
Stand
is an
corrected.
increase, it's not a decrease.
All
Okay?
Can I ask
I
Craig?
actually have a question for Mr. Uffelman. Since we are talking about, and we now have an applicant in front of us that has employees and is planning on potentially housing them. So some of the questions that we had when we were discussing this, and we have not perfected this or anything, what type of employees do you typically have, and do you typically propose to house there? Are they just seasonal? Are they full-time? Do you anticipate this being, full-time workforce housing? Someone's going to live there on the mall? 12 months of the year, questions that were kind of buried. I'm just interested to hear your take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have both full-time and seasonal employees and part-time in our business. And, off the top of my head, like, we were talking to our manager about using one of the units if we subdivide it into two. But obviously, she wouldn't want to live with a whole bunch of random people up there in a 5-bedroom unit. We would then just more likely use it for transient use.
Okay.
For
Use it for what?
transient use, like a rental for a the way it exists. If I couldn't, yeah, the current 5-bedroom, if I had to keep it the way it was, I would just be renting it.
Do those employees typically have vehicles?
Yes, my employees have vehicles.
And where do they typically park now?
They park in the,
Residential areas surrounding?
where is it? We buy them,
We pay for their parking at the Jackson Street lot
Yeah.
by
So
Colliers.
That has importance with regards to this, because if that's the case, then you're providing parking off-site. But
We
is that
actually-
going to be
we
written?
provide them with
is that
all
gonna be a
parking.
condition of the resolution? I'm not sure. I don't know that they offered that, but.
yeah, we purchase parking spots for all our employees in that parking lot. But I can't speak to what other business owners do.
Okay. So I just wanted to take that opportunity to ask those questions, because we're struggling. I don't know that we're struggling, but there was discussions regarding what type of employees would live there, whether they have vehicles or not, and whether it would impact the parking of the neighborhood. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, I just, Mr. for your benefit, or whatever the case may be, I'm going to read to you what my notes say as to the purposes of zoning. It says, "Small residential housing for employees advances the purpose of zoning, as that type of housing is needed in town and is an appropriate use for this property and is economically advantageous. Also, in a practical approach, the two units are likely to inspire less parking than a 5-bedroom unit, even though RSIS would say differently. He believes the C2 balance supports the parking variance."
I agree with that.
That's what I wrote. The reason I asked the question that I asked is that principally, your client's testimony was one sentence, and that was, "I intend to use it for employee parking." Mr. Halbruner's purpose of zoning essentially relied upon employee parking. And then when this is on the Airbnb, my resolution looks like I did a bad job.
Can I,
So I want you to have a chance to expound on the purpose of zoning advanced in the absence of employee housing, so that if this is granted and you don't use it for employee housing, we don't get yelled at.
so, Mr. Halpern, given what Mr. King just reiterated, which was your testimony, can you break that down into actually two separate benefits? Because it sounded to me like you possibly could. Rich, can you reiterate what you just stated again?
Sure. Essentially, I relied on the employee housing being the purpose of zoning advance, because our master plan likes
Okay.
that. I'd like to write down some other stuff.
Gotcha. Without using the word employee housing, the opportunity for smaller units, two-bedroom units, is going to be a benefit to the community over one larger unit. First of all, the type of person and the size of the population that goes within a two-bedroom unit versus a 5-bedroom unit is going to be far more harmonious with the adjacent residential uses. I don't want to use the word flop house, but I'll use the word flop house. You get 5 bedrooms, and that certainly has an opportunity to be a rowdy place. Two-bedrooms are much more residential friendly for the adjoining neighbors. And I think that's a benefit that results from having two bedrooms versus one 5-bedroom apartment.
And it also, I guess in a sense, produces the opportunity for employment housing, whereas the 5-bedroom doesn't produce as good an opportunity for that, based on the testimony of this gentleman.
Correct. The opportunity, whether it's used or not, but the opportunities is much greater to have two bedrooms available for workforce residents than a 5-bedroom would.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Bill, I do have a question, I'm sorry, but it's becoming a little bit confusing, because on the one hand, we're hearing rationale for the creation of 2 rental units to be put to use by the owner under any circumstances rental units are put to. And on the other hand, we have a proposal to ameliorate the problem of workforce housing by creating a space where workforce housing can be available near those businesses or by those businesses. These two issues are not coming together in terms of a
I
recommendation.
understand that they're looking to do both, if they can. The employee housing would be summertime, and in the off-season, if there's no employees, they would have the opportunity to do the other. It's not an either-or proposition.
Well, okay, I'll grant that. That could be a third option. The other thing we heard is that this current employee and owner is now providing off-space parking for their employees in recognition to the fact that they don't have space on-site. So could we craft a recommendation that this be approved with the understanding that it will be used for the workforce of the owner or the folks who own the building, and that they are providing, as part of the approval, they're providing off-street parking for their employees? That, to me, strikes a middle ground between the two issues that we're wrestling with. And quite frankly, if workforce housing is one item in our master plan, so is the problem of parking in the master plan. And we have an ordinance that sets clear and unambiguous standards for how many parking spaces are required. We constantly are asked for waivers for that, and I understand why. But I also understand that expanding this sort of an application in the face of the fact that we are doing nothing about the parking problem really is almost like a failure.
What would you propose they do about the parking problem, Dennis?
They made it, they're providing off-street parking for their employees.
So that's what they said they're doing. And
Okay,
and
let's-
it also doesn't take into account the employees who are renting the downstairs from them, who are tenants of these folks. So they have their own business, which is the jewelry store, and they have two tenants below,
Right.
below, which is another opportunity for them. So, you know, you're trying to pigeonhole.
I don't really.
No, I'm not trying to pick, no, what I'm trying to do is create a sort of a precedent for the fact that we can address both of these problems in different ways, the ways that we're not addressing them right now. We can't simply suggest, okay, you get a variance, you got 12 spaces you're never going to provide for, here's a variance anyway, and then we basically make the parking problem worse by creating a space that may or may not,
That's not a fair statement. They're making it worse.
Yeah,
That's
right.
not a fair statement,
We
Dennis.
haven't
we're making it worse by
ability
four
to utilize
spaces.
that second floor unit for whatever residential purpose we'd like to right now. So we're seeking to downsize that to two bedrooms to utilize for residential purposes, preferably workforce housing if we can do it, but without pigeonholing ourselves into that. Because right now, we're not pigeonholed to do that. He can rent that out to whomever, whenever he wants to at this point.
Oh, you can do that for the 5-bedroom unit, too.
Yeah.
And the testimony from their professional planner is that the two-bedroom unit is actually he didn't phrase it exactly this way, but that a two-unit is a less intense use than a 5-bedroom, because the reality is a 5-bedroom invites a huge amount of people, whereas the 2-bedroom is more likely to be a manager or two people sharing it, or a small family or something like that. So I'm a great example. I live in a building that has 2-bedroom units and one big 5-bedroom unit. And any problem we've ever had in our building was because of the 5-bedroom unit. I think a lot of heads are nodding like, yes, that's how it works.
Your concern would have a lot.
But the code doesn't say anything about that.
Well, that's
Your
why they're
concern would
asking
be a lot
that's
more-
why they're asking for the variance, Dennis.
That's right. And we're asking for a variance, and we have to weigh whether the code is to stand or whether it's to once again be ignored.
They're not adding any structure. The building is there.
They're adding 4 parking spaces they don't have.
So, we are, but
Remember, I also, and during our discussion, talked about double counting the parking spaces. If there are employees living above, they're already counted into the commercial parking calculation that's below, based on the one space per 200 square feet.
Plus one employee on the larger
So.
Yeah, and if they are,
There's-
and if they're not, they're not. But this is all speculative.
Well, no, it's not. That's what the code says.
No, they could have-
That's what the code says.
No,
could have-
Craig's statement was speculative.
No, but I mean, if you're looking at it that way, they could have one 5-bedroom apartment that is creating a parking problem.
Speaking of that, in your notes, Craig, you indicated that there was no count for employees for some reason. Could you,
Because there's none required for the mall when you're not dealing with this.
yeah, I just wanted to get a clarification on why that was so.
Can I ask, how many parking spaces do you actually pay for?
Thank you. We have 9? 9.
For what businesses?
Queen May?
We own Queen May Jewelry, and we have 10 employees that work for us, but one works not on site, so we get 9.
Okay, okay. I was just to see if any were tied to this property.
No. The 2 tenants downstairs have their own businesses.
I didn't mean to criticize that, I just want to.
No, that's okay.
Tied to this property.
But the rental, the 2 rentals you're asking for, you would not be renting any spaces for those people who would rent from you would be on their own.
If you were to utilize the two-bedroom units for your employees, presumably you're already paying for parking for those employees, so they'd have parking already, correct? Would that be right?
Correct.
So if they're utilized for employees, then yes, you would be paying for off-site parking for them. But if they're not, you would not be.
Correct, yes.
Craig, going back to what you were saying about the mall parking employees, why are those 9 not counted in this?
They're not.
The requirement of the code is on-site parking, off-street parking.
Right.
It's not,
No, I understand, but they indicated they had 9 employees. The code says,
Actually, he said he had 10, but he rents 9.
okay.
the parking requirements for the mall does not
I'd rather us not talk about.
That's in the ordinance.
I want to clear
All
my
right, that
record.
answers my question.
You're talking about a totally different business, and honestly, a lot of these things are historically interesting, but they are not commitments by the applicant. So it's really not even relevant if he pays for parking spaces, unless he's going to pay for them moving forward. So the fact that he owns another really nice business and has a bunch of employees and pays for parking has nothing to do with this application. It's just a curiosity.
Okay.
The fact that he may pay for his manager to have a parking spot, who may live in this apartment, a curiosity.
Yeah.
Unless he's committing to buying a parking space for this property.
Right.
It has nothing to do with your analysis of this, because he may sell that building tomorrow, and it may not be the owner of the Queen May, and they may not pay any spaces. So we got to do zoning analysis, not people analysis, okay? So let's just get all that. I can't strike it from the record. I'm telling you to disregard all that testimony. It means absolutely nothing. So let's just go on to this property and what the parking is for this, and all you're doing, and the only reason I gave them a bit of the business about that employee parking is because if that was the only purpose of zoning that they offered, and then they didn't do it, everything falls apart. But now they've offered another purpose of zoning, and it's cogent, whether it's credible or not is up to you, but at least it's in the record now, and then you can all do your balancing and decide if you think that having a dilapidated 5-bedroom unit, a living unit above this business is offset by the benefit of having 2 units, that the testimony is less intense, it's going to be modernized, and all that stuff is appropriate balance. And then you do that balance, and then you vote, and there's probably enough on the record either way to support your decision, but that's what you're doing tonight.
So I think we've kicked that around enough. Now, well, did we open up the?
I'll go first. and then
Okay,
do
all
public.
right, Craig, go through your report.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to summarize my November 21st, 2024 review memorandum for this application. You've heard testimony from the applicants indicating it is in the C1 primary business district. They are seeking preliminary and final site plan with a waiver of the submission requirements, as well as the associated variances that were discussed. I'm going to roll right into the completeness review. Because this site is comprehensively developed, There's no site improvements proposed. We did support the waiver of all of the submission requirements and therefore recommended deeming the application complete. With regards to the variances, I concur with the applicant. They're requesting 3 variances. The first is for a rear yard setback. 15 foot is required, 0.26 feet setback exists, and 0.26 feet setback is proposed to the change of use. The lot coverage, it exists at 100%, it's proposed at 100%, where 95% is the maximum. There's no changes to that, but it is a change of use, so therefore, they're requesting the variance for lot coverage. The only thing that's really substantially changing is the parking calculation. Based on the current standards, there's 1 space required for each 200 square feet of retail use. That requires 8 spaces. There's 2 spaces per 2-bedroom apartment in accordance with the residential site improvement standards. That has a requirement of 12 spaces where there is no room on the lot to provide parking. There's 0 spaces existing, 0 spaces proposed. So that's your parking variance that they've requested, and they've supported that with C2 test criteria testimony and gave the balancing test and special reasons. You can weigh that. If there's no questions with regards to the variances, I'm going to move on to the general review comments. That should be all conditions of approval, should the board grant that. Under item number 1, we've asked for the approval signature block to be added to the plans. 2 is the applicant is required to furnish the required performance guarantee and inspection escrows. And 3 is to tie that certificate of occupancy to that acceptable inspection. Item number 4 is to comply with the recommendations and requirements of the Fire Department, Police Department, Public Works Department, Environmental Commission, and Shade Tree Commission. We did receive those reports. They were all recommended approval with no comments. Do I need to read those into the record, or?
I think you just did.
Okay. I think the applicant touched upon that in his introductory statement, so I'm going to skip that. Item number 5 is compliance with all other state, county, and local approvals. 6 is this project is located in the historic district. You did indicate you had final HPC approval. Okay, so we would just ask for that to be provided as evidence of approval. 7, they're required to comply with any and all applicable affordable housing requirements. And then under item number 8, should the board grant approval, the applicant is required to submit 6 sets of plans that are perfected to meet the conditions that the board sets as part of their approval and submit that to the board engineer for review and approval.
Any questions of Craig? Okay.
If the businesses downstairs aren't related to this, why are we holding that parking against them?
We're not holding it against them, we're just updating the site plan with regards to the total overall site parking. So whenever we do this, like for a hotel or something like that, we always do a total comprehensive parking count so that it runs with the property.
Except that we didn't count what they needed for the 5-bedroom apartment.
Right.
That should have been
Well, that's a pre-existing condition, and their
Are you
testimony
referring to the thing
reflected.
that I said?
No, I'm just asking if the downstairs businesses aren't related to this upstairs apartments, why is it against them? And how many spaces would be required for a 5-bedroom apartment?
It's 3.5, right?
Yeah, I don't have the residential site improvement standards in front of me, but I took it,
So we're talking about 1 spot.
Yes.
yeah.
Apartments cap out at 3 bedrooms. They don't have the number of spaces required for
Okay.
5. The number required for 3 bedrooms is 2 spaces. So the 5-bedroom by RSI standards requires 2 spaces.
So we've gone through this with the DCA. You're actually allowed to bring that rate forward. So whatever that increase from 2 to 3, if you were to add that from 3 to 4 and add that again from 4 to 5, that would give you the appropriate RSIS count.
Okay.
So
That's 3.5?
do you have that? So can you
I
make
actually
that
have
calculation?
an extract of that. Maybe bear with me a second. 3. 2 bedrooms, 2.0, 3 bedrooms, 2.1. So a 5-bedroom would be 2.3.
Yeah, so you're adding .1 to each one.
Correct.
Yeah, so, doesn't really, the residential site improvement standard calculations are archaic and don't necessarily reflect what's really happening in our town. That's always been an issue.
Yeah, and actually, the garden apartment, I think, is meant to be a large apartment complex.
Yeah.
Not a couple smaller apartments associated with it.
Right.
That's the same chart that Vince Orlando tried to convince me that a 7-bedroom apartment only needed whatever the maximum
Yeah.
number of bedrooms on there was.
And that's,
No.
and that's the test case, and I actually contacted DCA, and they confirmed my rationale of that, projecting that out.
So basically, they're asking for one spot.
Yeah.
Okay, just so we get that on the record, and that's what Ricky just said. Okay, want to open up to the public? Anybody care to comment on this application? Within 200 feet? Outside of 200 feet? Jules?
Jules Roush, 1010 New York Avenue. I'm not,
Can you say that address again?
Julius Roush, 1010 New York Avenue.
Okay. Sir, sir, hold on, wait, you know the routine.
Yeah.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
I've not heard that there's a mercantile license that has been issued for this second floor apartment. Is there one?
We don't require that.
We don't, it's not occupied. The testimony was that it's not, it hasn't been occupied for some time. So we haven't used it for.
Well, that's the point. I don't know that there isn't a change of use of the second floor. If there's not a mercantile license, it hasn't been occupied, it's a vacant property, and you're now changing it from vacant to 2 apartments.
Vacant's not a classification. It's a residential property.
The most it could be is abandoned, but it's a permitted use, so. I don't think there's a rule you have to use a permitted use. You only have to use a non-conforming use.
If
But
the
your testimony's on the record, okay?
Okay. This application could be easily solved if the owner would say, we'll provide off-street parking by renting a space just like they've done for their other employees for these 2 apartments. And I would suggest that the board ask the applicant whether they would consider that to remove the question of variance need. We have a parking problem. If you're going to let every apartment on the second floor, every space on the second floor be occupied by an apartment, you're defeating the whole purpose of the need for parking.
Thank you, Jules.
Bill, can I say something to that?
Sure.
If they're renting a space that already exists, they're not creating a new one. They're renting, if he makes them create a space that already exists, you're just taking that away from somebody else. You haven't solved anything.
Right. Okay. Anybody else in the public care to comment?
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Hold on, yeah, we're going to close the public comment. Okay, go ahead.
And if I
Gary, go ahead.
Okay, so at the last meeting, from the minutes, it states that the board will continue discussion on the reexamination at subsequent meetings with input gathered by member Riggs from other municipal managers, including affordable housing and workforce housing definitions, enforcement schedules, and incentives. To me, we're putting the cart before the horse here. And I know we have to treat every applicant singly, but we're opening up a Pandora's box here for every other person that owns property in that mall. We have to decide how we're going to treat housing in that mall before we give anybody the ability to do anything there. That's short and sweet, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
If I can just, since I was referenced in there, some preliminary research that I've received back, they referred back to the state statute that I read into the record at the last meeting. So that is something that this board should consider for our next meeting, but I'll have more prepared notes, at that time.
From a planning perspective, there is a recommendation in the master plan with regards to workforce housing. The planning board has not perfected that recommendation back to the governing body, and the governing body has not accepted or changed any ordinance with regards to workforce housing. What we're dealing with here tonight is a request for 2 apartments and parking variances associated with them that deal with the residential site improvement standards calculation of parking. So we're not really addressing workforce housing. We're not, I don't think, in my opinion, putting the cart before the horse.
Well, it's been brought up a lot tonight.
Well, I asked questions because I was curious, because it helps with some of our discussion, but there is testimony on there, under the C2 criteria, with regards to parking and the change of use from 1 5-bedroom apartment to 2 2-bedroom apartments. That's how you should be weighing it. You know, whether you want to condition approval on them providing parking spaces for those units off-site, boards have done that in the past. But I don't believe, you're allowed to have pending ordinances, and applicants are allowed to bring applications before you that deal with stuff that you have not perfected or recommended or the governing body has not accepted. So,
But Greg, we also have the right to say that we ought to not do something which could make a problem worse, a problem that the city is about to get committed to fixing. In other words, the bucket's overflowing. Maybe it's not the time to pour more water in it.
your consideration, and I'll let Rich correct me if I'm wrong, your consideration should be site-specific to this application, not with...
And the weighing of the term hardship, and who gets the hardship and who is in hardship?
We didn't put the
They're not,
hardship criteria.
they're putting special reasons on,
Parking.
yeah,
You didn't ask for hardship, did you ask for substantial benefit?
yeah, substantial
Okay,
benefit.
But it's the same bucket. Whose substantial benefit? Is it of substantial benefit to the city to exacerbate an already out-of-control problem that we may be trying to fix?
In fairness, can I frame this for you? I mean, I don't want to interrupt your deliberations. I just want to, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I yield.
All right.
Can we,
I want to,
can we respond at all?
wait till I say what I'm going to say, then you can respond to that, because I want to try to summarize it and put it in a way that makes,
Easier sense.
yeah,
Okay.
okay?
Moving forward.
All right, look. We acknowledge that workforce housing is an appropriate purpose of zoning, okay? And this board has had discussions that are a matter of public record, that we're looking to implement some rules relating to workforce housing, okay? And I am on record saying at the last meeting, with no reference to this application, that if you don't have a clear statute that enforces it to be workforce housing, then what you're really going to do is create Airbnbs above commercial uses. That's the reality of it, okay? So that has led to this discussion. The question before the board is, in this particular application, this isn't someone coming in to put new apartments on top of a commercial use in the mall, creating a new parking problem, okay? The testimony here is it's a 5-bedroom unit that's already there, and they want to modernize it and make it 2 separate 2-bedroom units, okay? And the applicant, somewhat am I prodding, has fairly distinguished and said, we're not just depending on it being workforce housing, we're saying it creates the opportunity for workforce housing, and 2 2-bedroom units is less likely to be disruptive in this zone than a big 5-bedroom unit, okay? So that's what you're thinking about. That's a fair summary of their testimony, okay? So I don't want everyone to make this about a test case or deny it because we don't have workforce housing rules. I'm directing you not to do that. You need to decide this issue. But the fact that you think that you don't want to have an exacerbation of parking issues unless it really benefits workforce housing, okay? This may not be the test case for that because it's already a 5-bedroom unit, all right? So yes, under the RSIS, in a technical sense, a two-bedroom units, because they each require 2 parking spaces, all right? And a quirkiness about RSIS is that a 5-bedroom unit requires 3 parking spaces, not 4, all right? All right, so you all need to decide whether 2 two-bedroom units creates a greater parking problem or a lesser parking problem than a 5-bedroom unit, okay? RSIS says one thing, your experience may teach you something different. But in a technical sense, as a matter of the way RSIS reads and our ordinance, which adopts RSIS, it's true that a 5-bedroom unit requires 3 spaces, and what they're proposing requires 4. So they are, in a sense, and it's going to look terrible on the record, but they're exacerbating. They're creating a new parking, a needed parking space,
Recognized.
technically under the ordinance. But the professional planner's testimony is already before you, and you can weigh that, and you can weigh your own experience, whether having this 5-bedroom, 5 large bedrooms is a better or worse situation than 2 new 2-bedroom, 2-bath units. And you need to decide that, okay? And whether the applicant wants to volunteer something to encourage you, that's the applicant's decision. And so I'm not getting into all that, that's not my role. You guys can do your bargaining however you want to do it, but that's, to me, how I would frame the issue in your thinking. If the applicant disagrees, he can respond and say, I'm mistaken, or add more testimony, whatever you feel is appropriate.
Well, I just quickly, in response to Mr. Roush's comment, we do have a certificate of zoning compliance issued March 26th of this year that does indicate that this has 2 retail stores with 1 apartment above. So that is recognized by the city as of this year. But I believe Mr. Halpern wanted to touch upon parking, right, again. That's
One
where-
last thing with parking, that is going to add credence to my representation, that in my opinion, 2 two-bedroom apartments is of equal parking demand as 1 5-bedroom. I'm going to refer right back to RSIS. The numbers we've talked about thus far from RSIS are for garden apartments. For the record, that's the numbers we must go by, because that's the closest thing by definition. I will tell you that a garden apartment is more normally associated with a much larger building with many more apartments, where you have the economy of scale, where those numbers can be lower. If we look at the single-family home parking requirements of RSIS, for the record, we're not. But for comparison, a 5-bedroom, single-family home requires 3 parking spaces. A 2-bedroom, single-family home requires 1.5. So 2 two-bedroom homes would require 3. If we were talking single-family homes here, there would be no net change in the parking demand.
Do you agree with that, Craig?
I agree with it.
Can you just say it for me again in your words? I'm not saying John did it badly, but I want to give you the benefit, I'm trying to give you the benefit of our engineer.
Mr. Halbruner is suggesting that the residential site improvement standards calculation for garden apartments is not really appropriate, because typically those garden apartments are part of a large-scale development, and there's an economy of scale, is how he phrased it. I agree with that statement. And so he turned to something that we're more familiar with, single-family dwellings. So the residential site improvement standards for a 2-bedroom, single-family dwelling requires 1.5 parking spaces, is what he indicated. So if you were to double that for 2 of those, you'd get the requirement of 3 parking spaces. If you were to take a 5-bedroom, single-family dwelling, it requires 3 parking spaces. It's equivalent. He's saying it's equivalent in scale and equivalent in parking requirements. One 5-bedroom house is equivalent to 2 two-bedroom, single-family dwellings. That's what his comparison was. And I can go along with that rationale.
And that was the point I was trying to make earlier.
Craig,
But the residential site improvement standards is archaic. Like, we can project, it stops at certain points with numbers of bedrooms. For single-family dwellings, it's usually, you can project them out, but for apartment units, the scale doesn't work. So there's flaws in the calculation, in my opinion.
Craig, I just one question. Would the parking trust account be applicable in this situation?
It's not applicable.
It's not?
No.
Okay. Because I thought that was for changing, converting existing buildings. This is not a
When you look
converting?
at the conversions, the conversion is set up for conversions of single-family dwellings
Right.
into bed and breakfast.
Right, I remember that was the initial, but I didn't know
That's how it's defined.
if that carried through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, are we ready for a motion?
Can we separate these requested variances by vote?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept as presented, because I'm not sure the right wording. Rich, but
You want to do a motion on the whole thing?
yes.
The
Second.
typical way.
Site plan approval with variances.
So I'll phrase a motion for the whole thing, since someone requested it, and I heard like something like a second on the left there, so. You want to discuss it some more? I don't want to get anybody's way, Mr. Chairman, whatever you want to do. Tell me what you want to do.
No, I don't know that anybody has an objection to this except for Dennis, no?
Just for, I had a question. Can we separate the variances by vote, or do we have to do the whole thing together?
Well, you have a motion on the
Have to
floor
is a
now.
strong word, but I prefer that it all be voted together. That's my policy. I had a Superior Court judge disagree with me on that once, and he ultimately got reversed. But leaving that aside, I think you presented the application as a whole. In this instance, if you're going to separate them, I guess you're separating the C1s and the C2s, and there's really no basis to deny the C1s.
If one
which
fails,
are-
the application fails, if you look at it that way. So it really doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. You're going to grant the C1s. I mean, the building is the building, it's been the building for a very long time, so there's no useful reason to separate them, in my opinion.
All right.
A harder question if there's any conditions, but you want to make it a motion as is.
As is, yes.
So the motion I'd recommend being made, but how you vote is up to you, although I defer to the chairman if he wants a different motion to be made. The motion is to grant the variances outlined 1 through 3 of the engineer's report on page 3, with the pre-existing non-conforming structures to be a C1 standard applied and the parking issues to be a C2 standard as articulated by the applicant's expert, subject to the waiver of site plan recommended by your board engineer on page 2, and the conditions outlined by the board engineer 1 through 8. And to my understanding, this application, this has no restrictions on the residential use of the second floor.
Correct. Okay, that's the motion you want to make, Bob?
Yes, that's the motion.
Second.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right, you want to do
Did
a
someone
roll call?
second that? Who seconded?
Mr. Ludlow.
Thank you. Mr. Gorgon motions, Mr. Lundholm seconds. Mr. Gorgon?
Yes, and just the comment I want to make is that I think this is a big improvement and something that's really needed in the mall area, especially to make use of the second floor apartments on more of the structures there on the mall. So, yes.
Councilmember Yeager?
Yeah, I'm voting yes, because I believe, number one, in my mind, I think more potential workforce housing, even though it may not be, a lot of conversation on that, but I think that it's more important than the parking issue. And the second part is that in reality, you could make that 5-bedroom apartment, and I think it would take a lot more, it would consume a lot more parking spaces than the two bedrooms. I believe that's my personal math, so I say yes.
Mrs. Reed?
It's poor timing that you came to us about this because we just discussed workforce housing on the mall, and we are in a big conversation about it. So we've put you through the ringer based on that. I think you are adding to parking, regardless of all our discussion, because right now that apartment above has no parking going on with it. You're not using it, nobody's living there, so there's no parking spaces needed. So in a sense, we are adding to the parking problem. Maybe not legally with all the jargon we've had here, but technically we are. But again, you can go ahead and make that a 5-bedroom right now and not need anything. So what you're trying to do is beautiful, it's lovely, and I'm going to say yes.
Mr. Crowley?
The C1 variance has been proven significantly, and there's no problem with that. The C2 variance, I don't see that the case was made for that because it causes as many problems or more than it solves. And I pay great attention to what Gary has said in terms of the impact of this kind of precedent on the entire mall. So I'm voting, because we have to vote as a block, I'm voting no.
Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Mr. Riggs?
So I do appreciate the applicant's testimony, and obviously knowing that you had 5 bedrooms that were vacant, trying to convert that into 2 areas where hopefully you can have it as habitable space. Obviously, you heard this board's discussion, very much concerned about workforce housing. I would absolutely encourage that because I think it's a good model for it. But obviously, you could use that space right now as 5 individual spaces. So with that, I'm voting yes.
Mr. Badousis?
I'm going to have to vote no, just because I think we're setting a precedent for other landlords in the mall. We've been discussing this at previous meetings, and I think we have to define what workforce housing is in the mall and how we're going to use it before we allow people to create different apartments, whatever. So I have to vote no on this.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bezerra?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Len.
Our manager will be happy.
Okay. Okay, the next application, King's Cafe LLC, Joseph and Kate Chu, 401 Lafayette Street, Block 1046, Lot 8. Site plan, preliminary and final, amended, and various relief.
I was going to say, I guess I can begin while you're setting up your presentation. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Bruce Conwell with Cafiro Law in Wildwood. I represent the applicant, King's Cafe LLC, which is applying for preliminary and final site plan approval to reconfigure the approved seating and to propose 2 6-foot benches in the side yard buffer.
Could you just move that mic closer to you? I'm
Closer?
having trouble. Yeah, thank you.
Of course. Just like John's presentation, I'm going to be asking,
We're going to swear,
I was just about to do that, Mr. Bezerra, thank you.
Brian?
Brian Murphy's going to be offering testimony. I'd like the board to consider him as an expert.
He's recognized. I've been around
Thank you very much. And Ms. Kate Chu is also going to be presenting testimony as well.
Okay, will each of you please raise your right hand? Our board engineer, Mr. Hurlis, remains under oath. Do each of you swear or affirm? Do each of you swear, yeah, keep it over just a second. You haven't seen this on TV? Do each of you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. Okay.
The site is located in the C1 primary business district and operates as King's Ice Cream Parlor, selling ice cream, coffee, retail goods, toys, games, T-shirts, things of that nature, which is a permitted use in the zone. The original site plan was approved in November of 2019, where 16 indoor seats were approved. The applicant seeking to move 10 of those approved seats outdoors, and all nonconformities that were approved previously would remain unchanged. The application proposes 5 outdoor tables for consumption of ice cream, coffee, beverages, with each table having 2 seats for a total of 10 seats. The tables will be portable and within 10 feet of the principal building as required in the zone. And at this time, I think I'd like to have Kate testify. I have a couple of questions for you, just about the business itself. Again, Kate, would you please state your name for the board?
Kate Chu.
And you are a member of King's Cafe LLC?
Yes.
What's your role at the ice cream parlor?
Owner, and I work with the staff.
You work with the staff. How long has King's been open?
Since not this previous August, the August before.
That would
so
be-
23.
August of 2023. Okay, so even though the site plan was approved in 2019, you didn't actually open your doors to the public until 2023?
Yes.
It was later in the summer.
Yes.
Now that you've been open for a full summer, what do you notice about the traffic of pedestrians who come into the ice cream parlor? Do they congregate inside after they've ordered their food? Do they look to go outside? What is your experience with the ongoings of it?
Most of them want to head outside, and originally we had thought, we were confused. We thought the approved seating was for indoor and outdoor, but we took the tables away when we needed to do that. And now we have found that they're still heading outside, most of the customers. The flow of the ice cream is like long lines, as you guys know, and then they go outside, and now they're just kind of standing congested on the little pavement there, and they got a foot down on the driveway, and they got a foot, they're just kind of, before with the seating, they were more situated and organized. Now they're kind of all over the place.
Do you plan on having any sort of table service at the tables
No.
that are outside? They're just for eating once they've ordered their ice cream? Okay, just for clarification. And there's no entertainment outdoors or anything
No.
like that? Nothing that you're trying to propose, no live
No.
music?
No.
What time do you normally close at night?
10 o'clock.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions for you, Kate, right now. The board may have some questions for you. But I do have some questions for Mr. Murphy. If you could please state your name, and again, you've already been recognized, so I don't believe you have to offer any qualifications. Thank you.
Sure, my name is Brian Murphy, and I am professional engineer and land planner in the state of New Jersey.
Right. Brian, do you prepare site plans in the ordinary course of your work?
I do.
Bruce, why don't you have that microphone in front of
You got it. Sorry. But you did not prepare this particular plan, correct? Not when it was originally approved and not now?
That is correct. I did not prepare the original site plan or the plan that's before the board this evening.
But you have had an opportunity to review this site plan and to visit the actual site?
I have. I've reviewed the original site plan. I've reviewed the plan that's before the board this evening. I visited the site as well as the immediate neighborhood.
What's your general procedure when you visit a site like this?
Just to look at the site, to understand how it operates, to see the traffic flow, the pedestrian flow, and just get a sense for how it fits within the neighborhood.
And what are your impressions of this particular site?
That it fits as part of the Washington Street Mall, if you will. It's, as we all know, this part of the city is a walking part of the city, and for people to walk over and to get the ice cream, there's a crosswalk right in front of this that leads to the Rotary Park. And I think it's reasonable, as Ms. Chu said, for people to buy the ice cream and then to drift across the street and the shop along the mall.
Did you measure the sidewalks at the site?
I did.
And how wide are those sidewalks?
They are shown on the site plan, if I may.
Bring the microphone.
Yeah, thanks. The wall that faces the mall, it shows a 5-foot dimension from the curbing to the table, and the table is a 2-foot table, so there'd be 7 feet on, I'll say it's the east side, and on the
Lafayette Street side?
Lafayette Street side, yeah, and on the Jackson Street side, it's 4 feet to the table, and the table is 2 feet in diameter, so there'll be 6 feet from the curbing to the edge of the building on the Jackson Street side.
How much clearance is required?
In Craig's report, may jump ahead, he's requiring 5 feet. RSIS for a sidewalk requires 4 feet. But what's unique is that the Lafayette Street side, we have the full 5 feet. And on the Jackson Street side, there are 3 parking spaces in this immediate area. But what would happen, people would park there, and they would walk behind the cars along the along the sidewalk that's parallel to Lafayette Street to access the building. So these two, the ones that are fronting on Jackson Street, while there is 4 feet between the curbing and the sidewalk, most of it's reasonable for people to walk along the drive aisle, like you do across the street at the parking for Collier's Liquor, like you do for the parking at the Acme, like you do a lot of parking in a lot of places in the city. And the place where the access, the egress and ingress to the ice cream store, the 5 feet that's required is available.
Mr. Murphy, in your opinion, is the clearance likely with the tables? And were you able to measure the tables themselves? Do you know what they measure at?
I did. There was a table and 2 chairs that were around the side of the building during my inspection. So I was able to measure the table, which is shown on the site plan as a round table, and it was exactly 2 feet in diameter. And the chairs, as shown on the plans that were prepared by Mr. Orlando, are accurately shown.
In your opinion, is the clearance likely to create a substantial pedestrian traffic hazard that would endanger any sort of public safety?
No, none whatsoever. If you look at this, we have, they show the parking in the front. There's parking bumpers that are there, which would prevent the car from leaning over the curb, if you will. So there would be the full 5 feet available. And on the Jackson Street side, a car would not take up the full 9 feet, but rather a typical car is about 6.5 feet. So there'd be another foot or 2 on this side for people to walk around. And as Ms. Chua stated earlier, this has been the parking arrangement for the last year and a half. People just go into the store, come out of the store, and there's more than adequate room for people to walk safely.
In your opinion, would any of the purposes of the municipal land use laws be advanced by a deviation from the bulk requirements that are requiring 5 feet of clearance?
Yes, there are some special reasons, and I've highlighted 3 of them as part of this application. And the 3 that I've highlighted, their letters are A, G, and I. And A is to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands. Paraphrasing, to promote the general welfare. And I believe that this would promote the general welfare by having the ice cream store in this area and have the seats outside if it's a pleasant day for the people to enjoy the outside and enjoy their ice cream. I think G, as in girl, which is to provide a sufficient space in appropriate locations for commercial uses to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. And I think that in this situation, having the seating outside is an appropriate location. And then I, which is to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangements. And I think having the seats outside does 2 things. One, it opens up the inside, but more importantly, or as important, is that there'll be people sitting outside enjoying their ice cream, saying, come on over here and have an ice cream. It I believe, will add to the ambiance of this area of Cape May, and I think it's reasonable to have this as a bookend to the park. We have the Washington Street Mall on the one side and the ice cream store on the other side of the Rotary Mall.
So Would you say that the benefits from variance relief would outweigh the detriment to the public good?
In my professional opinion, the benefits would outweigh the detriments, yes.
Okay, you've already given your special reasons. Does the board have any questions for Mrs. Chu or for Mr. Murphy?
I have one. Somebody else had one?
No, go ahead.
No. So I listened to what you said, and basically it comes down to the fact that this isn't really a sidewalk that's used for transiting a public street or a sidewalk, like we would think of a sidewalk in front of a building. This is really an extension of this business, rather, it's an entrance to the business, and nobody uses that sidewalk unless they're coming in or going out of that business. Is that basically?
That's accurate, yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Has the applicant had a chance to review the fire department and police department review memos?
Craig, yes.
Are you going to address that at all? I mean,
So the police department and the fire chief both recommended approval, but with the installation of parking bollards or a concrete post that would prevent the possibility of.
Okay, are you willing to do that? Is that going to be part of your?
Would you like to offer an answer, Mrs. Chu?
Whatever you guys recommend or require.
Well, they're raising it as a safety issue. They also raise another substantial issue that I think we had concerns with when this was first approved, was this is, at a very awkward configured intersection. The site really is not sufficiently deep, and cars are backing out of parking spaces and affecting traffic on Lafayette Street. And the police department is cited that as being an issue. So we might have an opportunity to right a wrong here and with a slight redesign. And I'll make a recommendation. If we were to slide, my recommendation is going to result in the loss of a parking space, which I know is terrible in the C1 district. But if we were to slide that handicap parking space over to the left, as you shown on the plan, slide the loading with it, and you could actually make that a formal seating area in the front, and that would allow any car backing out of the handicap space to actually have that K-turn opportunity in front of it, in front of that stall. You see where the cross-hatched area is? So that it wouldn't have to back out on the Lafayette Street, and then it could pull out on Jackson Street. But it would result in a loss of a parking space.
Could they even have more seating over there?
And so it gives you an opportunity to put seating over there, and not have it on the sidewalk where it may block. And the only thing that I was worried about with the design and why I was asking for the width of the sidewalk was to make sure that the accessible route was provided between the accessible handicap parking space and the front door. There has to be 36-inch clear, and that's why I was asking for, the construction details of the seats and whatever that was going to be provided there. There has to be a 5x5 landing that's clear, provided at the top of the ramp to allow someone in a wheelchair to come up to the top of the ramp and make a turn. That's all required in accordance with the ADA requirements. But I think if we shifted that parking space over, that gives you a bit of an island that you could actually curb or provide bollards in and actually put a little seating area in where that cross-hatched offloading area is for the handicap space. I don't know whether you're willing to consider that.
I marked up the drawing as you were talking, Craig, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that I'm showing what you were suggesting. Just
Okay.
that accurate? That we would extend the drop-off area, slide the handicap parking space over one space. Of course, the sign would go over. The ramp, we could adjust the ramp if necessary. I believe the ramp is on the far east side of the building right now. We can provide a path, an accessible path. We have no problem with providing the bollards, and I
Can you get the mic, please? I just realized you're not speaking.
The bollards, I'm not an engineer.
There's going to be some concrete work involved in relocating the accessible ramp. So if you're doing that, you might as well curb that whole area and provide a curbed seating area.
And then you have more outdoor seating.
Then you
less
have
people
more area
lingering
for the outdoor
around the parking lot.
seating. Unfortunately, the only detriment to that recommendation is you lose one parking space. But the benefit is, it's a safer seating area, and I think you're going to mitigate that backing out movement into Lafayette Street, which I believe is of utmost importance for safety here.
So if I could just comment, if that's okay. I'm one of the deputy OEM coordinators for the city, and I've been by this property. I agree with Mr. Hurlis's analysis in terms of trying to restructure that a little bit to alleviate some of the issues there. And I would like to go on record in saying I highly agree with both the chiefs in terms of having ballards there to help protect, anyone that would be out there eating their ice cream or doing like that, because you don't know in this day and age.
Can I also comment too on that? This one photograph that you provided is certainly a pretty good indication that bollards are a requirement there, because of the fact that you not only have people sitting in those tables, but you have a lot of people standing around those tables.
See, the
So I would
tables are
agree
gonna
with Craig.
push people off of the sidewalk and into your parking lot. So if you have a safety concern expressed by our police department about the backing out, it certainly advances the purposes of zoning to make the site safer. So the board may decide that having one less parking space is good for you, and you may be able to have more than 10 seats out there if you create a nice seating area over there, and then people won't congregate in the parking lot, they'll congregate in your seating area, and it would be safer and maybe better, and you may even have more seating. Understand?
Yeah.
I think that's the sense of our engineer and the
Sounds
board, and people kind of like that, so.
Yeah, and I also want to spitball here a little bit too. Is there any chance that the parking spaces that you see here in front of the building, while you're redesigning your ramps and so forth, could they be moved further away from the building, creating a larger space?
The one thing I notice is that the concrete parking stops
Right.
are too close to the curb. They
Right.
should be offset so that when you pull up, you hit it with your wheel,
That's-
your bumper's not going
That-
over the side.
That's exactly my
So they
point.
should be staggered back.
Yeah, move those parking spaces
Yeah.
back away from
You're still providing the same parking
Parking space.
space, but
you're providing a better space for
it's it's
congregation.
more of a buffer from the sidewalk.
Yeah.
It's a better safety.
I mean, if you're moving things around anyway, it might be a good idea.
Council, do you have any deadlines that are coming up in the next 30 or 60 days that getting this now as opposed to 60 days from now or 30 days from now would be critical for you?
Kate, feel free to answer that.
Oh, yeah, I always like getting things finalized and not coming again, but I'm sorry. But whatever you think is best. I mean, we're going to be closed. Yeah, we're going to be closed, so we can come to another
My sense of
meeting.
the thing is if we adjourn this for one meeting, you and your engineer, and Mr. Hurlis, may come back with a knock your socks off plan that you will like better than what you proposed, and that the board will like a lot better.
I guess I just think about hiring the whole team to come back again. I'm just thinking about money, but yeah, whatever you think, if we need to do that, then we need to do that. Sorry, sorry.
Okay, well, I'm not a decider. I'm just.
No, I know, I hear you. It might be better, I feel like I wish I had my husband here to help me make these choices, but, yeah, if you think we need to, we can't settle anything tonight, or do you feel like, Craig, we could settle something tonight?
I think the board's going to want to see the redesign before they
Okay.
vote on it.
Okay.
I think that's
And-
what Rich
and
is.
if I
think-
could just
I
also.
think you're going to be able to get more than 10 seats.
Okay,
right.
sounds good.
So I
Right,
want you to come
that
back
could
and
be a
say,
benefit, is
That-
that you
yeah.
can get
you
more
may be able to
seats.
put 3 or 4 more tables in that area you just created.
Yeah.
So
Is
your
that like a
husband may be
green
very
space?
happy with you to
Yeah.
go back and say,
Yeah.
I now have 16 outdoor
Yeah.
seats, or something like that, or whatever that number
Is-
ends up being, I don't know.
Is that like a green, turning into like a green space kind of now? No. Okay.
It could be like a patio,
A
It's
patio,
like-
oh, patio, okay.
It can be like the dry dock.
curbed patio. That's what, that'll be safe and, you know,
And protected from the car.
yeah.
Yeah, and it helps our police department because it's moving that back out area. So I'm just, have a lot of advancements and maybe getting a little more in return, and then maybe viewed very favorably by the board.
If I could
I think
just,
Brian can communicate with Craig, and
yeah, if I could
Yes.
just add in
And I
on.
have to, I can back up a little bit. We didn't do the original site plan that was approved, and I'm filling in for Mr. Orlando, who did a good job, so I have to work with Mr. Orlando to get his plans to make these revisions, and it's not a big deal. Don't
Yeah,
get
it's
me
not a
wrong.
huge effort.
It's not.
To fix this.
I just want to be sure, if I'm listening well this evening, that, as Mr. Hurley said, there will be a reduction of one parking space. Listening to the previous application, I think we all can agree that parking in this immediate area is premium. So we would be conceding a parking space. Putting the bollards up is not an issue, and creating an area, and if we can create some impervious or some pervious area, we will be more
Brian,
than
not to
happy
be
to
a
do
lawyer
that.
about it, but you're eliminating a dangerous parking space. So every time you say that from now on, you say, we're eliminating a dangerous parking space. That's how I would phrase it.
Yeah, I just don't want to come back next month
I'll
and
use
then,
that term at every
get in a wrestling
the
match.
suggestion is you might be able to gain some outside seating.
That would be awesome.
And if I could just add before we adjourn from it, though, for the Ballard design, I know that because in the historic nature, just want to maybe have the HPC subcommittee review the specs on what the Ballard would look like from a design perspective. I know that they had a lot of insight in with the firehouse and other spots in the city. I would just offer that, so if you were to come back to this board, we could hopefully make a decision one way or another. You would have everything all together.
And there may be a design that you guys do together that eliminates the need for ballards. I mean, it depends. It depends. If you're moving all your people over into a safe seating area, maybe that's the place to protect, and moving the blockers back a little bit and create a little safer environment. I don't know, but that's.
You
the
may only
engineers
need
will
them,
discuss that.
you may only need them closest to the driveway opening.
And as you're getting creative, you may actually figure out a way to save that parking space somewhere.
There's no room for that.
And that's part of the
Since we're
problem.
getting creative.
Next two wishes?
If you guys are going to, if you're going to view the loss of a dangerous parking space as a real negative, then don't make them do this. It's going to be a waste.
Okay, Rich, I'm just joking.
I'm just saying, they're spending time and money, but I think they're going to make this money back having the.
And I think that one thing, there's also another member of this LLC who's unable to appear tonight. So I think Kate's going to have to discuss that with her husband, who's also the co-owner of this property. But I think preliminarily, we're just considering the scope of the work that would be required in order to do away with this parking space and the concrete work. And I think that the cost is a legitimate concern. To take the step to do away with this, I'm not really sure what concrete work would be required in total, other than the installation of ballards, potentially to protect at a minimum what would be a new seating area outside. So I'm just trying to keep up with the engineers and the discussion about the scope of the concrete work that would be
About
required.
30 linear feet of curbing and whatever flat work that would fill in that area, that 9 by 18 or 8 by 18 space.
I just have a question. Is it possible to just put, what's it called, ballards or bollards? Is it possible just do that and just keep, I'm not sure we're going to have the finances to do this whole new plan. As much as it sounds great, we're like, I'm just not, is it possible to just do bollards and keep this plan that's proposed tonight, or?
I can't support that based on the police department report citing a hazard that's.
Even with the bollards? I thought they said there'd be, all
No,
right.
it's the reason I made the recommendation is because of the backing out movement onto Lafayette Street. When we initially approved that, we were thinking that handicap space would be a low turnover space, but it's happening frequently. It's happened in front of me when I've been in town. It's occurring. It's cited in a police report as a dangerous situation that can be fixed. And I think the board is kind of encouraging you to rework your plan. They're going to be flexible with the number of seats. You can get more seats and create a safer situation. We think we can, make a better site plan.
I agree with Mr. Hurlis's comments on there, and you see in the police department's review of this, it's happened to me while I've been driving down the street. I mean, that's a busy intersection, so if there's an opportunity to help alleviate this, I would have to support Mr. Hurlis's recommendation.
I thought the ballards that they were talking about across the whole front of the building and all was a reaction to all the people spilling off of the sidewalk near the parking area. That was the impression I got from it, but I don't know that. But the more you pull people away from spilling into the parking lot and into a seating area that's protected, that's not an area where people are pulling in, then maybe there's something that can be discussed among the engineers about the ballards or whether planters or some other curbing can go there that isn't as expensive and nervous for you. And maybe the cost ends up being relatively close, and when that's compared to having a bunch more outdoor seating, you may decide that it's better, much better economically. We want to give you that chance. You have the right to come back to the board this week and say, look, we considered all this, and we just can't do it. We want to vote up or down on what you have here, but then you get the vote you get, and I mean, that's okay, but losing stinks. So that you may lose this, because the board, I can get a sense that some of the board's concerned about, well, we're going to put seating there, and now there's still these pictures of people spilling out on there, and we have this dangerous condition out there, so they may say no, and then where are you?
And perhaps moving those buffers further away from the building may solve the problem without having to do a bollard.
That's a good point, yeah.
And you may be able to put a planter there or something there that directs your people to not spill out into the direct parking, but rather kind of encourages them to go towards the seating area. So it's not that expensive to do. You guys are very creative, so it may not have to be.
Bill, is it possible to move the parking spot over and add the ballards and not have the seating area on the side?
Well, the seating area is a kind of a, I don't want to say a carrot, but it gives, it
Yeah.
helps them,
But the back out issue is with the handicap spot, right?
apparently. Is that right?
Yes.
So could you just move the handicap spot over, eliminate that space, and put the ballards in?
We could, but they're losing all that seating.
They're not asking for seating, though.
Well, they hadn't thought about this before. Now they're going to have a dead, what, 20 by 30 space over there or something?
It's 8 by 18,
8 by 18?
plus whatever is on the side of it.
You can pick up another 10 seats.
Yeah, they can put some. If you want to try to hash it out tonight, I just want to give everybody a chance to think. Or they can go forward and vote. I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm just giving the opportunity. You want to get the best play you can with public safety.
Yeah, I think it's probably, can we just take a quick moment outside if
Sure.
that's okay? Can we just take 5 minutes?
Sure, thank you.
Take a 5-minute break.
Could we move to suspend this?
Microphones off, please.
Do an announcement, and they just come back, yeah.
Yeah, so we could say, we're not going to consider this tonight, you go back and work it out.
You can do that.
I mean, if they don't want to do that, should we do that?
You can. You can say we need more site information and public safety, this and that. Technically, you'd probably vote it down, but you can move to,
Yeah, but if they force it,
we can't sit as a body. We can't. We can't turn on, we can't sit as a body and turn on mics off. I guess we can.
We're back in session, guys.
Well, I appreciate you giving us a minute to talk about this. And I think one of Kate's only questions at this point is if we table this application for now, and we come back with a revised plan, which would do away with this parking spot, supposedly, would we able to apply for a seating plan in that area now, but also have these seats that would wrap around the restaurant as well? I mean, that's, I think, what her intention would be, is to see if we would be able to have the seating in this designated area, but then also keep these two tops, for lack of a better term, around the building as well.
It wasn't my intention to make you lose the seating you were requesting, but rather add to it. At least that's, as I was speaking.
As long as,
I'm not saying it's the
I
board's
think as
intention.
long as
My
we
intention was
understood
trying
that.
to give you more seating than you were presently requesting. I was not trying to move that seating to another location.
In exchange,
What I was
in
saying.
exchange for making the intersection
Probably
safer.
Would the board want to see bollards along that seating?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
So I think you can leave it, but you have to provide bollards along that seating on the sidewalk.
Well, how about planters?
But there has to be something traffic safety. I think the fear is someone pulling into a parking spot and stepping on the gas instead of the brake.
And like Dennis said earlier, if you put the bumper stops a little bit further away from the curb, that would,
How about the engineers worked it out in the most cost-effective way you can come up with? But when you have head-in parking, someone mentioned maybe along Delaney's or something, that's cars going parallel to the sidewalk. These are cars pulling in to your customers, so there needs to be some concerns about that. We just did the same thing on the thing at the end, Castaway Cove.
At the Cove Restaurant.
Yeah, Cove Restaurant. Oh, I see Castaway Cove, that's in Ocean City, I'm sorry. Yes.
And I have just one clarification. You're not going to be suggesting anything but moving more of your indoor approved seating outdoors?
that's
And
not what we're saying.
No, I think the recommendation was that we would allow for more seating in that area,
In addition to what they have.
in addition.
Okay.
So when you come back, the number of additional seats would be important to me.
Okay.
Rich, what about notice
I
requirements?
just want to also point out, just for the board's own thought process, is that outdoor seating doesn't necessarily require more parking under ordinance.
Yeah, just so for the board's, let me go back. For the board's information, there is an outdoor seating ordinance.
Right.
They don't comply with it because that ordinance requires them to provide 5-foot clear on their sidewalk. So if they had 7 foot all the way around the thing, they could provide that seating on there, they can go pull a permit right from the city. The fact that they have that, I think the seats on the side where there's only 4-foot clear is what triggered the fact that they had to come here and revise the site plan.
And they have a seating patio over there. That additional seating, the seating patio doesn't add to the parking.
Yeah, but it does require the site plan,
Yes.
a site plan approval.
All right. And the ballards would be on the side of your building as well, because you're putting seating there, am I correct?
Well, no, but the cars aren't pulling directly in there. They're pulling parallel in.
Right, but they could go through the.
You don't need bollards in the side.
Every building that has seating.
No, Maryland, they're parking that way.
Gotcha,
See what I'm
gotcha,
saying? Yeah, I
yes.
understand.
right.
Okay, it's just that when they pull into the seating, that's when you get worried.
We won't create this in a vacuum. We'll talk to your engineer and get his input, which we'll get from you guys. So when we come back, it'll be I think, a plan that you're all going to be pleased with.
I think so too.
Okay. So just so we know, we're going to
Adjourn, and I'm going to
We're going
announce.
to table, okay, all right.
So if someone will make a motion to adjourn, and then if that gets approved, I'll do an announcement, so you won't have to do any notices or anything.
And you'll waive the time constraints? You'll waive the time constraints,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, someone make a motion to adjourn,
Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
or to table it.
To table, to
At the
table.
table.
In court, we call it adjourning the motion, but I think
Adjourning the motion, okay.
All right. Motion to table,
This is to the January meeting?
Well, can I just say, we have the Healy application coming back January 14th, anticipated, so I didn't know if you want to do it in the work session or the same meeting,
I think do this.
January
It shouldn't
28th.
take long. If,
we'll put this first, we'll put this one.
let's put this one
This
first.
is not as
Okay.
involved.
January 14th, 2025.
Yeah, vote on the motion to.
Did someone make a
table, yeah.
motion?
Bob made the motion, Dennis seconded the table.
Oh, thank you. Motion by Mr. Gorgon, seconded by Mrs. Reed. Mr. Gorgon?
I think Mr. Crowley seconded.
Wait, was that,
We both have great.
shall we change,
Don't insult.
It does, that's fine.
is that okay? All right. Mr. Gorgon? Councilmember Yeager?
Yes.
Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Crowley?
Yes.
Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Mr. Riggs?
To table, yes.
Okay, so this application.
Wait,
is
I
tabled for
wasn't
the meeting
done.
on-
Mr. Bedusis? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Becerra? Thank you.
Okay, now this application really has been tabled until January 14th, and our meeting times are still going to be 6:30.
6:30,
In this room,
2025.
this application will likely be heard first. This is your notice. If you have any objections or concerns about this, you're required to appear at that date and time. There'll be no further notice of that application, and that January 14th meeting was placed in our notices for public meetings last year, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you're all set. All right? All right, good luck.
Okay, before we get to one last motion, I would like to just say, this is Mike's last meeting, I think.
Can we pay the bills before? Do you want to pay the bills?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I need a
Craig's
motion to pay the
bills.
bills.
Motion to pay the bills.
Second.
And
Okay.
this is Mike's last
Mrs.
meeting, I want to say it's been a pleasure having you on the board, Mike.
Thank you very much, Bill. It's been a pleasure being here and working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
I'd like to echo that sentiment as well. Mike's been a valuable asset to this whole town, not just this board.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, final motion?
Oh, wait, does everyone agree on the bills? Just say yes. Thank you.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, and good night. Merry Christmas.